The GTX 750 Ti. On my birthday in 2015, those were the words I read on the screen while my dad was showing me the specs of the brand new, custom-built computer he had assembled for me. I still remember all of them too. Intel Core i5 4690K, 8GB of DDR3 running at 1600 MHz dual channel, a 550 watt NZXT power supply, and a fresh install of Windows 7 on a 512GB hard drive, all in a gigantic white tower with blue LEDs shining through a small plastic window. And little did we know, that first PC set me on a path where, many years later, I would be sincerely obsessed with PC building. In fact, most of the computers I built have been white cases with blue LEDs, just like that one. And while most of those parts I moved on from, the one that I'm still curious about exploring more is that special model of GTX 750 Ti, which just so happens to be the one I have right here, the exact one I played games with over 11 years ago. This specific graphics card is the EVGA GTX 750 Ti FTW. Released in early 2014, this model was based on the stock mid-range 750 Ti. It has 640 shading units and 2GB of GDDR5 on a 128-bit memory bus. The main difference is in the clock speeds. The stock 750 Ti has a base clock of 1020 MHz and a boost of 1085 MHz. The EVGA FTW model bumped these clocks up to 1189 MHz base and 1268 boost, although in games I saw more like 1359 MHz boost clocks. However, the memory clock on both models remained the same at 1350 MHz. TDP was around 60 watts, and while the 750 Ti can actually draw all its power just through the PCIe connector on the motherboard, this model came with a single 6-pin. Why that is, I'm not sure, since it seems the voltages are locked down on this card, at least in Afterburner. The rest of the benchmark system is the standard, Intel Core i7-8700 non-K, and 32GB of quad-channel DDR4 running at 3000 MHz, and the display's native resolution is 1080p. But I feel that just running the benchmarks as I normally do isn't quite doing my original card justice, so I'm going just a step further and overclocking this card with MSI Afterburner to push it as hard as I can after the initial run of benchmarks. One more thing to note, for some reason Afterburner thinks this card is running its memory at 2700 MHz instead of the stock 1350 MHz. Basically, it's just doubling the actual memory speed for the reading. So with that in mind, it's time to see just how far my 750 Ti can still get in 2026. Starting off with Forza Horizon 5 using medium settings at 1080p, we got 28 FPS average with 1% lows down to 25. Gotta say, not the greatest start to the benchmarks. Barely scraping 30 is a little rough, but it's important to note this game came out 7 years after this card released, so running at all is still rather admirable, especially considering this was the low to mid-range graphics card when it released. Dropping the settings to very low instead, we were getting 51 FPS average with 1% lows to 50, so while the game looked significantly worse, the frame rate was much better. Running at low settings isn't much of a difference to frame rate or graphics, so I'd say very low is the best option here, at least preset-wise. Running Deep Rock Galactic on low preset at 1080p native using DX11, we got 129 FPS average and 1% lows of 98. Overall decent frame times, and a pretty dang high frame rate. That's the benefit of the more retro aesthetic. Runs great on older cards and still looks good, even when dropping settings. I mean, sure, it doesn't look nearly as good as running ultra settings on a newer card, but again, for a graphics card I got in 2015, the fact it's running this at all, and even at 120 FPS, is insane. Doom Eternal had some issues with the amount of VRAM on this card. It basically refused anything higher than the lowest preset at half render resolution. That being said, it definitely knew what it was talking about. Even with the low preset and rendering the game at half of 1080p, so 540p, we were only getting an average of 45 FPS and lows of 29, just short of 30 FPS minimums, and these graphics to achieve it, well, at least it's still playable, although it's not very enjoyable, and it makes it rather hard to aim properly when every weak point is just so big. Next is BeamNG, and on the low preset 1080p, we got 51 FPS averages and lows of 40. Solidly above 30, so honestly, still very playable. And it's worth a reminder, this was a budget card in 2014 that doesn't even need an external power connector. If you were still running this card from back then, sure, it's not the best graphics settings, but if you can get past that, you're probably still having a relatively good time with these games. Now, Risk of Rain 2's presets had such large performance gaps in them, I tried changing the settings around myself. These ones on the screen now are the ones I ended up landing on. And at 1080p during the first map, with the Swarms artifact to double the amount of enemies and put more strain on the card, we were returned with 80 FPS average and 1% lows of 66. Again, late game, you're probably going to see that drop, possibly even into the low 30s, but almost any computer is going to have that same issue, and it still looks pretty good too. Running Counter-Strike 2 on the medium preset, 1080p, we had an average of 99 FPS and lows of 47, a pretty wide range. If I was looking for a higher frame rate, I might have set it to low, but honestly I don't play competitive shooters anymore, so instead I'm trying to see here how well I can get the game to look while getting around 60 FPS. Although I'm aware in these types of games a higher frame rate is more preferable. But hey, above 100 FPS average, still pretty good. Or at least around 100. Finally, we have Minecraft, and using Sodium and Iris and the default renderer, we still get an excess of 200 FPS. Actual numbers are 219 averages and lows of 143. Just reminds me of how big of an upgrade it was from the laptop I was gaming on previously, at least back when I first got this computer. And of course, that's including Sodium and Iris, which are performance-enhancing mods, so they do quite a lot for the game here. No terrible issues to report, just ran pretty well. Now, trying some shaders was a different story. Trying complementary shaders on the very low preset, we got an average of 43 FPS and lows of 34. It seems shaders aren't nearly as kind to this card as I was kinda hoping they would be. Still, the fact that we have shaders of any kind running on this and we're still above 30 FPS is rather impressive, and even with this lower preset, it still looks pretty good. One last note, here I have these scores for my 3D Mark runs. Firestrike, we had a score of 4,865, Time Spy was a score of 1431, and Steel Nomad had a score of 152. For the most part, we're above the average performance of 750 Ti's, at least the ones that have ran 3D Mark and submitted their scores, but that's not really a surprise. Remember, this is a special EVGA model with boosted clocks right out the box. But what if we pushed it even harder? For overclocking, I ran Unigine Heaven and brought the core clocks and memory clocks up slowly, and when the GPU crashed and the computer reloaded, I backed off the clocks a little bit. I also watched for any graphic anomalies. Pushing the GPU faster, it's possible for the core or the memory to have some issues rendering frames properly, and it might place like a black polygon in or accidentally put a vertex in the wrong place and stretch a face out. Basically, I was just looking for any messed up rendering stuff and backing off the clocks until I saw no more artifacting. Using this rather rudimentary and probably stupid method of finding the best stable clocks I can, I was able to push an extra 110 MHz to the core clocks and 450 MHz to the memory, bringing the total boost clock up to now 1469 MHz on the core and 1575 on the memory. Running the 3D Mark benchmarks for a quick comparison, and wow, it's actually a measurable increase. In Firestrike, we increased score by 760 points up to 5625. In Time Spy, we got an increase of 107 points, bringing it to 1538. And Steel Nomad, we lost 2 points down to 150. I double-checked both runs with clocks, and that's including both the stock and the quick and messy overclock, and it was consistent enough that I had to accept we somehow lost 2 points between runs. Ultimately, it wasn't measurable, but it is pretty strange. Either way, with a quick OC on the card, it's time to see how much performance we gained in the games. Starting off once again with Forza Horizon 5, and hey, on the medium preset, 1080p, we actually got 37 FPS average with 1% lows to 33, solidly above 30 FPS. Compared to the average and lows of 29 and 25 respectively, that's actually a large enough increase in performance that I'd run a medium preset with no real complaints. And dropping it to very low, we had 54 averages and lows of 53. Incredibly tight frame pacing, although we saw almost the same in the base clock run, just 3 FPS lower in both average and 1% lows. Still, any increase is a good increase. What's that saying again? Free performance? In Deep Rock Galactic, I actually bumped up the preset to medium and ran 1080p native, again using DX11, and we had an average of 100 FPS and lows down to 88. Super playable, honestly. It's fun seeing that my first GPU can still run some of the games I still play today with good frame rates. It's these types of runs that show maybe you don't need the fastest GPU to run your games with a billion FPS to have fun, like all these people are always saying. It's really about making do with what you got, and if the 750 Ti is the only card I had, I'd still be having a good time playing. Mostly. Running Doom Eternal low preset in half res because of the low VRAM on this card, and we're running 50 FPS average with 1% lows to 33. Before the overclock, we were hitting lows of 28, and to be clear, it was not very fun. This setting, though, it definitely takes some time getting used to the half res enlargification applied across my screen, but I think I'd be able to make do with this if it's all I had. Man, 750 Ti really was something, and still is in my opinion. I mean, it's still running this game that released 6 years after this card did. Now onto BeamNG on the low preset, 1080p of course, and we had an average of 56 FPS with 1% lows to 43. Compare that to the average of 51, lows of 40 we had before, and yeah, it's not that big of a jump. I couldn't really feel a difference between the two, but hey, you win some, you lose some. And at least it's still playable, right? And didn't go down in frame rate. Now for Risk of Rain 2, I actually had some troubles with the overclock I applied. This game, unlike the previous ones, was just crashing constantly, and I had to lower the clocks quite a bit, down to 1434 MHz on the core and 1525 MHz on the memory. However, even with the slight drop down on the old 750 Ti, we did still see a measurable performance bump, averages of 101 and lows of 78. Compared to the base clocks and the frame rates of 80 FPS average and 66 lows, it was noticeably better. With an increase like that, you could probably even change some of the settings up and still be hitting the previous frame rates, although again, late game would probably be a bit of a toss-up. Counter-Strike 2 had the same issues as Risk of Rain 2, had to drop the clocks the same amount, 1434 on core and 1525 on memory. But on medium settings, 1080p native, 107 FPS average and 1% lows of 53. That's an increase of 8 FPS average and 6 FPS lows. Let's go. Yeah, some of these don't scale well with the clocks. I mean, we still got a bit of a bump though, so yay. Finally, we have Minecraft with Sodium and Iris, default renderer, 1080p native. We had the same average of 219, but our 1% lows increased by 10, from 143 to 153. Not bad. And switching to the shader, complementary shaders, on the very low preset actually had an incredible outcome. 47 FPS average, 1% lows of 45. Those are some super tight frame times. Compare that to the previous average and lows of 43 and 34 respectively, and this is a definite glow up, and a win for overclocking. And there it is, my very first graphics card pushed as fast as it can go. Compared to graphics cards nowadays, was it rather impressive? Well, no, not really. Remember, you can get an RX 580 for like $50 with 4 gigs of VRAM, and that thing would blow this poor little 750 Ti out the water. But that's not really what this video was about. Just a video showing my appreciation for my first video card. We have many good games together, and I wanted to give it a proper send-off by benchmarking it at its best. So, thank you to my dad for building my first computer for me and starting my obsession with tech, for better or for worse. And thank you 750 Ti for inadvertently bringing me to the gaming scene and introducing me to the world of gaming as a whole.